Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneDrop, created for people with diabetes by people who have diabetes, and by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
This week, let's talk about stress, and let's talk about the not-so-great effects it can have on diabetes. Now you're in a cycle of not just physical issues, but emotional ones, including guilt.
The guilt comes from, I think, a lot of times people feeling different or feeling like they're all alone and that everybody else with diabetes is doing great, and I'm the one who is having trouble.
Dr. Mark Heyman is a diabetes psychologist and the founder and director of the Center for Diabetes and Mental Health. He was diagnosed with type 1 in college. We're going to talk about some simple things we can try to do to manage the stress that these days seems to be unrelenting. In Tell Me Something Good, parents going an extra mile to make their kids feel included, and a big challenge ends, but as they say, T1D 24/7. We'll explain. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am your host, Stacey Simms. Really glad to have you along. If you are new, we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. My son was diagnosed with type 1 right before he turned 2. He is now 15. I don't have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting and local radio and television news, and that is how you get the podcast. This is not the show that I thought I would be doing this week. Like many podcasters, I have an editorial calendar. I don't always stick to it, obviously, but I have things planned out, and I have interviews that are, in the can waiting to be aired. But I thought this was a really good subject to talk about right now because, as I just said, I don't live with diabetes, but boy, we are all living with stress. And I thought, what are some things we can do to figure out how to better live with diabetes or with, whatever your health issues might be? Everybody has something. I have my own autoimmune disease. How can we just take care of ourselves in a time where this news, as I said, just seems to be unrelenting? So I put in a post in a Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group, which I hope you're in, by the way. And if you're not, please join it. I was really worried about how everybody was holding up. And so we talked about self-care. And we had a really nice thread of comments. Of course, that's still there in the group. If you haven't seen it yet, take a look, add your own, maybe get some advice from it. But I decided to call in the experts. And I very much appreciate Dr. Heyman jumping on with me. We hadn't talked before. He was more than willing, and I'm sure we'll have him back on again. And I'll get to his interview in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneDrop, and OneDrop is diabetes management for the 21st century. OneDrop was designed by people with diabetes for people with diabetes. OneDrop's glucose meter looks nothing like a medical device. It's sleek, it's compact, it seamlessly integrates with the award-winning OneDrop mobile app. Sync all your other health apps to OneDrop to keep track of the big picture and easily see health trends. And with a OneDrop subscription, you get unlimited test strips and lancets delivered right to your door. Every OneDrop plan also includes access to your own certified diabetes coach. Have questions but don't feel like waiting for your next doctor visit? Your personal coach is always there to help. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneDrop logo to learn more. My guest this week is Dr. Mark Heyman. He is a diabetes psychologist and a CDE and the founder and director of the Center for Diabetes and Mental Health. Mark was diagnosed in college immediately 2 weeks before he had a long-planned trip to Paris, and he talks about that. We get to that at the end of the interview, and I asked him a little bit about his diagnosis story. But I wanted to talk to Mark about how we can handle the mental load that has just been relentless all of this year. I'll come back at the end of the interview and just tell you a little bit more about how I've been handling things. I've done some things I think are good and some things I know haven't really been helping, but we'll talk about that after the interview. Here's my talk with Dr. Mark Heyman. Dr. Heyman, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so eager to hear what you have to say, and I know you're busy, so thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having me, Stacey. I appreciate it.
How are you doing? I know that probably wasn't the first question you expected as the psychologist, but how are you doing these days?
I'm hanging in there. I think that it's a strange time to be a psychologist as well as to just be someone living in this world. We're all kind of trying to process the news on a daily basis. And, I have a 16-month-old daughter, so trying to take care of her and kind of juggle my work and childcare and kind of all of the stress there. So I think overall I'm doing pretty well, but definitely am feeling the stress of what's going on with COVID and with the riots and with the unrest that's happening right now. So thank you for asking.
Oh, my goodness. Well, it is, as you say, it's such an extraordinary time. And there's really no words left anymore. It's such a cliche, right? We all get those emails in these challenging times, in these extraordinary times. But as you said, we've had this COVID situation for months now. It's sort of been on low boil, and I think we kind of learned to live with it in the background. And then, of course, the events of this past week, protests, riots, questioning a lot of people, even if they're not physically doing things, leaving the house, trying to figure out, where do I stand? What do I want to say? We're all on high alert. What are you telling people that you're speaking to kind of, I don't want to say step back necessarily, but maybe break it off into smaller bites? What do we do?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things that we can do. The first is recognize that everything that we're feeling right now is normal, that anybody else in that same situation would be feeling unsettled and feeling stressed about, what's going on in the world right now. I think oftentimes we have these situations where we're feeling something and then we feel guilty for feeling it. I shouldn't feel stressed, or I shouldn't feel X. And I think that taking a step back and recognizing that, these feelings are really normal. The next thing is really to talk to other people and to be able to vent, to have a sounding board, to be able to get your feelings out, because that doesn't necessarily make the feelings go away, doesn't make them better, but certainly to be able to share them with other people and get affirmation and get validation for those feelings is a super helpful thing that we can do as a way of processing. And then also taking a step back and, recognizing that, the world is in a tough spot right now, but also we don't have to over-engage with what's happening. We taking a step back and taking a break from social media sometimes, and just taking a break from the news can be a really helpful thing to give yourself some perspective, so that when you dive back in and learn about what's going on, and start thinking about what you might be able to do to help the situation, you can see that from a fresh perspective. Yeah.
I think especially in a time right now where we are being challenged to pay attention. And, and I can only come to this through the lens of what I have, which is a white suburban mom, right? We're being challenged, pay attention, learn, speak up, let other people know what you're thinking. But that doesn't mean be on Twitter 24/7. That doesn't mean you have to watch all of the news. Is that what I'm kind of hearing you say?
Yeah, I think that one thing that we think is that if we want to be in control, not necessarily of the situation, but certainly be in control of our feelings and be in control of our environment. And I think that one way that people try to get control over those things is they do something called over-engage. They engage with the news and they get involved with it because they feel like the more that they know, and the more that they see the ever-changing landscape, the more control they'll have. And I think that it's certainly a valid point, but there's also some pretty big downside to that because if you're following Twitter, constantly, it's stressful, and you're constantly looking for the changes, and that's stressful. And the reality is that on a minute by minute basis, nothing's going to change to the fact that nothing's going to change in a sense that is going to really probably change what you do or how you react. Mm-hmm. And so, taking a step back and recognizing that over-engaging doesn't actually help with your stress, and sometimes they can actually make your stress worse and, increase it as well.
All right, let's bring diabetes into this, because that's really, what this is all about here on Diabetes Connections. And I don't live with diabetes, but I am, I'll be honest, I'm worried. Maybe it's a mom thing, and I see the people in my Facebook group, and we're part of this larger community. You live with type 1. I mean, stress is bad for anybody, but on top of type 1 diabetes, and I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I was talking to this with my husband last night, and he pointed out I live with an autoimmune condition. I have ulcerative colitis. And he was laughing at me. He's like, why are you worried about diabetes? You have to take care of yourself too, which I'm really not. I'm not eating great. I'm not exercising like I normally do. So again, bringing back the focus to diabetes, but I guess any chronic condition, you live with type 1. Are you feeling more stress on top of diabetes?
Yeah, I definitely am. I'm definitely feeling more stressed because, I mean, for lots of reasons. One is that, I'm a stress eater. So when I'm stressed out and when I'm around food, like that's one of my coping mechanisms, for better or for worse. And so that doesn't do great things for my blood sugars. Also, just stress in general is definitely impacting my blood sugars. And I'm seeing, a lot more variations than I had before, as well as sleep. Certainly, my sleep isn't great because of the stress right now. And when I don't sleep well, my blood sugars definitely run higher, which makes me not feel great, but also makes me more frustrated. So, I work with people with diabetes and help them manage their stress, but I certainly have a lot of those same stresses. And so it can be a challenging thing to balance. One thing that I've done to really kind of help myself is a couple of things. One, I've been really intentional about exercising. Luckily, I have a little bit of flexibility in my schedule, and so I'm able to exercise on most days. And I find that starting my day off with exercising helps my blood sugars and also helps my stress. Also, just cutting myself some slack and being kind to myself around my blood sugars, recognizing that, I'm doing everything that I can to manage them the best that I can, and that sometimes they're not going to cooperate. And that's true anytime, but especially to when we're in a time of stress where with all these other variables going on, being kind to yourself and giving yourself some grace and some slack can be really helpful, and recognizing that this time will pass. And that may be a time where we can be much more intentional about our diabetes management, but also it'll be smoother sailing, hopefully, because the stress won't be a compounding variable there.
Well, and that's such a great point, because I was going to ask you, and you've pretty much answered it. But when someone with tight diabetes control, or someone who really is trying to manage well, if they have a very stressful time like this and their management, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, slips, or you're seeing higher numbers or more variation. And then I think a lot of people have guilt on top of that as well. How do you then deal with the guilt and not blame yourself? You mentioned trying to dial back and see the bigger picture. It's not going to last forever. Is that one of the things you'd recommend?
Yeah, I also think that, connecting with the community, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or in real life, if you can, and recognizing that everybody else is going through the same thing and everybody else is having, more erratic blood sugars right now is really valuable, because the guilt comes from, I think, a lot of times people feeling different or feeling like they're all alone, and that everybody else with diabetes is doing great, and I'm the one who is having trouble. And that's why I try to be really open about, the challenges that I have with my blood sugars. Like with my patients, I'll oftentimes take out my phone and show them my CGM graph and show them that my blood sugars are nowhere near perfect, because it makes them feel like, it takes some of the sting of that guilt away, of recognizing that, I can certainly make better choices sometimes, but diabetes has a mind of its own. And being okay with riding those waves is critical for our mental health. Because if your only metric of success is keeping your blood sugar between those lines, and the only way you can not have stress in your diabetes life is by having perfect blood sugars, you're setting yourself up for failure. So we need to have a different way of looking at it.
Every once in a while, Mark, I'm stopped. I can't even imagine what it is like to live with type 1. Just so much that you have to do. And I have somebody, I have my kid in my house that we've babysat for 13 and a half years. And every once in a while I keep thinking, gosh, it is really such a burden. But that's neither here nor there, but just to hear you put it like that, I'll probably take all of that out. But
let me say something there, whether you want to put this in or not, is I actually encourage people not to use that word burden, because it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You say diabetes is hard, it's such a burden, and you're right. I'm not going to argue with you there. But then when we talk about how big of a burden it is, it kind of gets it snowballs and grows and becomes bigger. And I think that when we say we have all of these things going on, we have diabetes and COVID and George Floyd and all of these compounding things, and we say and diabetes becomes a bigger burden. It's almost like this expectation that it should be. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but we don't want to have people get to a point where they say, well, I had diabetes and therefore this automatically means that. You want to I like to give people the space to be able to, see whether it's a burden or not, but not automatically assume it's going to be.
I love that. And I'm always working on being better at language. And I really appreciate that. It's one of these things where, you want to help. And every once in a while, you really, I slip on that. So I appreciate it. But okay. But let's keep going on that, right? Okay. So I'm a caregiver, I guess a little bit less so because my son is 15 and it's not like when he was 2 and I was doing everything with him. Any advice for me, in addition to not standing around saying, this must be such a burden for you. How can I lighten your load? Right? I mean, he's doing great. He's got his own way to manage stress. We're talking a lot. He does exercise quite a bit, which has been really helpful. He's connected with friends. But as a parent or caregiver or spouse, any advice for us so that we're not putting more stress on the person we're trying to help?
Yeah, I think take a step back and recognize that, that he has it. He's got this taken care of, and that you're certainly there to help him in whatever way that you can. But from what you're telling me, it sounds like he's doing really well with that responsibility. And so, but certainly kind of the same thing about, over engaging on Twitter around the protests right now. I think that over engaging with your son around diabetes, especially when there's not a whole lot you can do right now. I mean, because he's doing really well, that just adds stress to you. And so if you're able to kind of take a step back and not over engage so that it doesn't aggravate him, but also gives you some space to recognize, and also gives you space to recognize that, but also see that he's doing well and give you the confidence that you need to continue taking out that step back. Because as he grows up and, goes to college someday, it's going to be a great skill for you to have.
We're working on it.
It's a never-ending process.
That's great advice. What are some small changes that you might encourage people living with diabetes in these crazy times to do?
Yeah, so a couple of things that I would recommend. I mean, just a simple tip is, one of the things that people have really struggled with that I've been talking to over the past 3 months when we've been in quarantine is kind of their routine has been pulled out from under them. So they may not be going to work anymore. They may not be able to go to their favorite restaurant or to the gym. And diabetes can actually be a great grounding tool because, diabetes takes routine. And so keeping your diabetes routine up right now can be really helpful, one, for your management, of course, but also for your mental health, because if you know that every morning you're going to check your blood sugar or change your CGM site every Thursday or whatever that routine is, it can kind of give you some grounding within your day. That's number one. Number two is do your best to stick to your regular diet, especially, I mean, I know that this is a little bit late coming 2 or 3 months into this, but, we talked to a lot of people who are having a hard time with blood sugars because they're at home now and they have food all around them. And so finding ways to kind of to keep on eating healthy to the best of your ability and in a way that help you manage your blood sugars can really obviously make your blood sugars more stable, but also help you manage your stress around those erratic blood sugars. And then the third thing, and this is one of my favorite tools that I use all the time. I use it personally, and I also recommend to my patients to use, is mindfulness. And what mindfulness is, if you are not familiar with it, is being aware of your experience in the present moment without judging it. So right now I feel stressed, and just recognizing, I feel stressed. You're not judging it. Nothing good or bad about being stressed. It just is. Right now, I can tell you right now, my blood sugar is 253. So I'm on the higher side. And I could look at that and say, I can't believe it's that high. It's, I must have done something wrong. I'm an awful person with diabetes and I just can't manage my diabetes right. Or I can look at my blood sugar mindfully and say, okay, well, my blood sugar is 253. That's neither good nor bad. I feel a little frustrated with that, but that feeling is neither good nor bad. And just be able to recognize what you experience, because if you're able to do that, it gives you a little bit of a distance from it and doesn't let you get wrapped up in the story of what does that 253 mean about me? What does that frustration mean about me? What is whatever I'm experiencing mean about me? Because we all experience things all the time. We have thoughts and feelings and blood sugars and, whatever all the time. And be able to recognize that and notice them without putting a story behind them can be really, really helpful. And I think that's really also helpful for what's going on in the world. Recognizing your emotions and your thoughts, and recognizing that those are normal experiences, but you don't have to judge them. If you feel sad or if you feel angry, that is what you feel, and that's okay. So I'm a big fan of mindfulness, and I could talk about it all day long in relation to diabetes. But I think it's a really, really helpful tool, especially when things are overwhelming like they are right now.
I'm trying to remember where I read it, but I read somewhere recently, and it's exactly what you're saying is, when you are feeling out of control and you're feeling very emotional and you're feeling angry or sad or stressed, to kind of breathe into it and let yourself feel it. And that was a revelation to me. It has helped me so much. It just kind of calmed me down to hear that was okay to do. And I guess that is a bit of mindfulness.
Well, exactly, because humans don't like to feel uncomfortable about anything. I mean, we don't like to feel physically uncomfortable. We don't like to feel emotionally uncomfortable. And so our go-to strategy with those things is avoidance. We avoid, and you can think about it how you do it in your life. You have to have a difficult conversation with your husband or your kid, and you put that off. You avoid it because you don't want to do it because it's not going to feel good. You have to go to the dentist and avoid going to the dentist because that's not going to feel good. And what would happen if you recognize that you're scared to go to the dentist or that you're uncomfortable having that conversation, but you do it anyway? And notice the thoughts and the feelings that you have when that happens, but you don't judge them. You just notice them and say, right now, I'm feeling really nervous. And that's okay because that's what anybody in my situation would feel. It doesn't mean anything about me. It just means that I feel nervous. And doesn't mean that's comfortable, but it's just a recognition of what my experience is right now.
I don't know if you can answer this, and I'm a little uncomfortable asking, but I think we should talk about it. You and I we're not people of color.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to try to put myself in somebody else's shoes like that. But I cannot imagine the stress right now not only in that community, but in the diabetes community for people of color.
Yeah.
I mean, because we can say, turn off the news or be careful about this. But I think it is to the point right now where many people, and again, I'm probably saying something stupid here, so please forgive me. This is my perspective from where I sit right now. But, you can't turn it off. It's part of who you are. And I'm wondering if you have any advice, perhaps, for that community.
Yeah. I don't. I think that, I would, the only advice that I have, and I'm not sure this is great advice, is to keep talking. I think that what I've seen in the social media community is with people of color as well as other people in the community is a lot of support and a lot of wanting to listen. And I certainly want to listen, and I want to understand better because I don't understand and I can't understand, and I really want to try. But it's going to help me to understand better if people of color in the diabetes community continue speaking and continue letting us know what they want us to hear, because I'm all ears.
We mentioned a few small changes that you might be able to make. Any big changes that you'd like to see people kind of work their way up to?
I think that continuing. This is a general thing, but continuing to learn about these issues and just continuing to have a thirst for knowledge and understanding around them. I think that I think that's the best thing that we can do right now, and really the most effective thing, because that will hopefully not trickle, but really expand into bigger changes that we can all be a part of, and that we can all be helpful with. But I think that for our mental health, I really think that small changes are the best way of going about this, and really trying to take things one day at a time and one change at a time. Big changes are so overwhelming, and they oftentimes feel impossible. And so breaking them down into smaller changes, just like we've been talking about, with, maybe a bigger goal in mind. So maybe the question is not necessarily what are the big changes, but what are the bigger goals that we have for our mental health around diabetes, for our diabetes management, for our inclusion, and what are the small changes that we can make that are moving us towards that goal. And certainly, I can't tell you or anybody else what your goal should be, but I think that defining that goal and really taking some time to think about that can be helpful in helping you to define the small changes that you need to make in order to get there.
Before I let you go, and maybe I should have started here since it's our first time talking, let's talk a little bit about your diabetes story, because you were diagnosed in college, right? I
was. It was 21 years ago on Monday. So wow. I just celebrated, or just commemorated, I should say, my 21st anniversary on Monday.
I should buy you a retroactive beer. Sorry about that. Your diabetes is legal.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was 21 when I was diagnosed. It was the end of my third year of college. I was at UCLA, and I was for probably a month before I was diagnosed. I was not feeling well and just getting progressively sicker with all of the typical symptoms. The problem was I had this dream of going to France. I had been studying French for a long time, and I got an internship at the U.S. Embassy in Paris for that summer. And I really didn't want to go to the doctor because I was scared that they were going to tell me something was wrong and I couldn't go to France. And so I put off going to the doctor for a long time. I couldn't tell you how long, but it was certainly a couple of weeks. And finally got to a point where I was walking to class one day, well, actually on June the 1st, 1999, and I couldn't go anymore. Something's got to change here. So I ended up going to the student health center, and they took a finger stick and it said high. And I was like, well, high, medium, low, that can't be that bad. And the doctor kind of shoved me in a chair and said, don't move. So they called the paramedics, and they strapped me to a gurney. And the problem is that I was at UCLA, and at UCLA, the student health center is at one end of a quad, but there's no road access. So the ambulance had to park across the other end of the quad, and I had to be wheeled across the entire quad in front of the entire school to go to in this gurney to go to the hospital. So went to UCLA Medical Center and was diagnosed there. The next day I had an appointment with my new endocrinologist, Ann Peters, was on call that day. And so she became my endocrinologist and spent a couple hours with me the next day, teaching me about diabetes and, giving me insulin. And at the end, she's like, is there any other questions I can answer for you? And I was like, well, I'm supposed to go to France in 2 weeks. And she, without hesitation, she's like, well, of course you'll go. So I went to Paris. Great. 2 weeks after my diagnosis, I went to Paris. I had no clue what I was doing. I would email her every couple of days with my blood sugars, but on the one hand, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. It gave me the confidence that I needed to know that diabetes was not going to stop me from doing anything. On the other hand, I was flying blind, and I survived and I was just fine, but it makes for a good story.
It is a great story. Wow. And how was the internship, diabetes aside? Are you glad you went?
Oh yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the internship was, it was government work. We'll put it that way. But I got to live in Paris for the summer, and had an awesome apartment in the middle of the city, and got to go and travel all around, and it was unbelievable.
Sounds like a once in a lifetime. I'm so glad you were able to go.
Yeah.
And then how did you decide that you wanted to work in the field that you do now? I mean, how do you get from being diagnosed in college to, helping other people with diabetes with their mental health?
So that's a funny story. So I kind of towards the end, I majored in political science in college. And so as I was leaving college after my diagnosis, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer or didn't want to pursue anything kind of in that realm. And I came to the conclusion that I wanted to go into psychology. And a part of me wanted to do something diabetes related. I was lucky that when I was first diagnosed, I was doing okay psychologically. I didn't have a whole lot of big challenges other than kind of the normal diagnosis stuff. But I was really interested in, how this affects other people. So I did some research, realized I wanted to become a psychologist, but not specifically around diabetes. However, to get into graduate school in psychology, it's really competitive. and I needed a story. And so diabetes seemed like a good story to tell. About how I wanted to work with people with diabetes. And so I told that story, not really thinking that it would ever come true. And it kind of did. I went to, and I did research in diabetes. I saw patients who had diabetes, and I realized not only do I love doing it, but it's also a huge need. And so, I love it. It's a lot of fun. And it's really challenging, but I feel like I can use my own personal and professional experience to really make a big impact in people's lives.
It's wonderful. Okay, and I have to ask you, you said you have a toddler? You have a baby?
Yeah, I have a 17-month-old. Yeah, it's wonderful. She was born last January, and now she's walking, and she's just started to talk, and it's so cute, but it's a lot of work.
Oh, that's wonderful. Have you all been, at home for the last couple of months together?
We have, yeah. So, we had childcare. We had my parents are in town here, so my parents were helping us out a couple of days a week, and we had some nanny help. But once this all happened, we kind of isolated ourselves and are just now getting back into letting my parents take care of her again. So, which is a great relief. But it's been a lot of fun and a great blessing to be able to spend time with her over the past couple of months. But it's taken a toll on my work and my ability to do work that I need to be doing. So it'll be good when we can get back into a more normal routine, hopefully real soon.
As we start to wrap this up, we've kind of, I guess we've scratched the surface on managing stress and diabetes. It really is a never-ending issue, is it?
No, it's not. I think that we have a lot more questions than answers here. Especially both with stress and diabetes, as well as how do we live in this kind of crazy world we're in right now, as well as live in this crazy world with diabetes. And so, I wish that I had all the answers, but I think that we need to keep asking the questions, because without the questions, we're not going to get any answers.
Mark, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I'd love to have you back on to answer maybe some listener questions and go through more of this. But thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're so very welcome. Thanks, Stacey.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Simms.
I'll link up some more resources about mental health and diabetes, including Mark's website. And I said I was going to talk a little bit about some things I've been doing. I'll tell you the best thing that I've been doing to manage this stress is walking my dog. I walk my dog just about every day. And we don't walk particularly quickly. Boy, she would love it if I would run with her. I'm not a runner. And we are very, very fortunate to live near Greenway. So I'm able to escape. It feels like an escape, I promise. I mean, it's just green. And it's usually pretty quiet. It's getting very hot here. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. And most people who walk and run do it very early in the day or later at night. But I don't mind it so much. And I'll go out, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and have the place to myself. I'm careful with my doggie, and we make sure she has water and all that stuff. Don't worry about her. But walking the dog, listening to podcasts, sometimes listening to nothing really helps. And on those walks, I do not listen to news. I do not listen to news podcasts. I do not listen to serious issues. I listen to stupid comedy podcasts, my Game of Thrones podcast, and some other fun ones. Pop the group. Maybe we'll make a podcast list of things to listen to when you want to distract yourself. Another thing I do that I do think helps is about half an hour before I go to bed. I try to do an hour, but I'm kidding myself. About half an hour is I disconnect from Twitter and Facebook. I'm in bed. It's late. I'm staying up so much later than I was before this. It's almost midnight, but I'll stop looking at the news. If I'm not really ready to go to sleep, I'll read a book for a little while, or I'll play solitaire on my phone. But I'm done. Sometimes I cheat. Sometimes, gosh, there's been nights, especially last week, where I felt like things were changing moment by moment, and I needed to see, and I know that wasn't healthy, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know. And that was tough, but I know a lot of you feel the same way. And then the things I'm doing that are not so good is I'm definitely eating more junk and eating more than I was before. And that was the worst for me, honestly, back in April. I think April, I kind of felt like, who cares? We're going to be indoors forever. No one's going to see me again. And I'm going to wallow in this. And I eat a lot of really bad junk food. And I've been drinking more alcohol, which is really unusual for me. And you'll laugh. Drinking more alcohol means I'm drinking like once or twice during the week. I usually have like 1 or 2 drinks on the weekend, and that's it. But those are things that I've noticed that I'm doing because I'm stressed out. But, doing this podcast helps me immensely, hearing your stories, being able to tell some stories, and having something to do, right? Having something to work on is extremely valuable. So let's get back to it. Tell Me Something Good. I love that in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And we started with Dexcom back in the olden days before Share. Yeah, in 2013, when Benny started using the Dexcom, you couldn't share it. So trust me when I say using the Share and Follow apps makes a big difference. Benny and I set parameters about when I'm going to talk to him about diabetes, how long to wait, all that kind of stuff. But it helps us talk and worry about diabetes less. If he's at a sleepover or away on a trip when things are back to normal, it gives me so much peace of mind. It also helps if I need to troubleshoot with him. And this is what I love. We can see what's been happening over the last 24 hours and not just at one moment. The alerts and alarms that we set help us from keeping the highs from getting too high and help us jump on lows before they're a big issue. Internet connectivity is required to access separate Dexcom Follow app. To learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. In Tell Me Something Good this week, I was scrolling through Facebook. I'm in a ton of diabetes groups, and I mute all of them because otherwise it looks like diabetes book to me, right? It's everything. It's relentless. So I mute the groups, and then when I want to see stuff, I go back in and look. And I saw this in a Dexcom group, and it really caught my eye. I will post the picture of it in our Facebook group for Diabetes Connections. So Dan writes, my 7-year-old was feeling crappy about being diagnosed and wearing a sensor. So I did what needed to be done and made him feel better with my permanent sensor. Just the outline, color to come. His reaction was priceless. And yes, I cried. And this is an amazing tattoo. It takes up his entire upper arm, like elbow to shoulder. And it's an octopus, which I'm assuming he already had. And then the sensor is kind of in the octopus's tentacles. Tentacles, that's right? So it just looks amazing. And then people in the group, of course, started chiming in with really positive comments for him, but also, hey, I have a tattoo or I have this idea. And people started talking about diabetes tattoos. And then somebody said, which was what I was thinking, because it does say G6 on it. What are you going to do when you're on the G7 in a few months? And Dan said, I don't know, maybe another tattoo. And somebody else said, no, that octopus has 7 more tentacles. Just put it there. And I guess he's going to come back and show the truly finished product. But to me, it looks finished already, but I guess there's color coming. So hopefully we'll do a revisit and we'll show you the finished tattoo then. And a follow-up, and I guess kind of a wrap-up to something that I shared. I think I only shared this on social media, the Diabetes Family Connection, the T1D 24/7 Challenge. This was for the entire month of May. And the Diabetes Family Connection puts on different programs. They put on the diabetes camp in my area. These are the guys behind Project 50 and 50 last summer, where 2 guys with type 1 summited the highest peak in all 50 states in 50 days. And while there was an injury and an accident, they did finish. And so it was pretty incredible stuff. But their T1D 24/7 was a challenge that asked people to move every day for the month of May. They said, no days off for managing T1D, no days off during this challenge. And there were some rules and interesting little things. And of course, they wanted people to maintain social distancing. And it was a fundraiser as well. They had a Spotify playlist. One of my favorite things about this is the warnings we all got because this playlist was not moderated for explicit lyrics. As I said, these are the guys who put on our diabetes camp. So a lot of parents on their list. We appreciate that heads up, you guys. So congratulations to the Diabetes Family Connection for a really big and well done fundraiser. I'm sure they'll be doing more like this, and some of them are in our Facebook group. So we will continue to spread the word. If you have a Tell Me Something Good story, let me know. Email me, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, or, just give me a shout out on social media and we will get it on the show because it's my favorite part of every week. So tell me something good. If you're listening as the show is first released, later this week, the American Diabetes Association Scientific Sessions is going to be kicking off. This is the 80th conference for the ADA, and it is their first virtual experience. What does that mean for you and me? Probably not much. I have never been to the scientific sessions. I was thinking about going this year, but of course it did not happen. But this is the time when a lot of studies come out. This is when a lot of the companies that we all follow release big news. So please stay tuned. I'm going to try to follow as much as I can on social media. We do have shows planned in the weeks to come with everybody that you would expect. I'm really excited to be able to share some of these studies. Some of these things are embargoed, but after the scientific sessions, I would say probably by next week this time, I think we'll all have a better idea of where the studies on technology stand. and probably one or two surprises, because every year something pops out from this thing that's either a breakthrough study or something that didn't work out and completely stopped, or, somebody from outside the ADA scientific session says, look at me over here. So we'll see what happens. But I hope you'll follow along. I'll do as much as I can to give you the information now and then go in depth with the newsmakers as they come on the show in the weeks to come. Thank you to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you for listening. I hope you got something valuable out of today's show. I hope you'll continue to engage and let me know if I can help, what you need, what you want to hear. I made fun kind of earlier in the show about these are challenging and difficult times. But, man, they really are, and we need each other more than ever. Thanks for being here. I'm Stacey Simms. I'll see you back here next week. And until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Simms Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.